Today, we're diving into a really fascinating scientific quest. It's the search for something that could completely change how we diagnose bipolar disorder, a simple blood test.
So, let's start with this central problem. For so many people, getting a correct diagnosis for bipolar disorder can take years. Sometimes, believe it or not, more than a decade. That's a huge, often painful delay. But why? What's the holdup?
Well, it really comes down to how it's diagnosed. Unlike something like diabetes where you can get a clear biological reading, there's no objective test for this. Diagnosis is based entirely on a doctor observing a person's behavior and listening to their symptoms. And that can be subjective, plus the symptoms can look a lot like other conditions. It just makes it a massive challenge to nail down.
And that, right there, is the core of the problem we're talking about today.
And this isn't some small, niche issue. Bipolar disorder affects somewhere between 1% and 3% of the entire world's population. We are talking about tens of millions of people who are stuck in this waiting game, hoping for a faster, more precise way to get the help they need.
So this massive challenge brings us to the potential solution, the hunt for what scientists call biomarkers.
The dream, the holy grail here, sounds pretty simple, but for psychiatry, it would be absolutely revolutionary. An objective, reliable test from nothing more than a simple blood draw. Just imagine the impact that could have.
So what exactly is a biomarker? Well, think of it as any substance in your blood that we can measure that acts like a little signal flare. It can point to a specific biological state, a disease, or even tell us how you're responding to a particular treatment. It's a biological clue.
And that's exactly what researchers are doing now. They're basically playing detective, sifting through the blood for these clues. So let's take a look at some of the most promising suspects they found so far.
And these clues, they're starting to tell a really fascinating biological story. For example, a neurotrophic factor called BDNF, which helps brain cells grow, often seems to dip during acute episodes. At the same time, inflammatory markers like IL-6 are almost always higher, which suggests there's some kind of chronic inflammation going on. Then you have things like S100B, which can indicate stress on brain cells. Each one is a different piece of a very complex puzzle.
Okay, so it sounds like we're on the right track, right? We have clues. Well, like any good detective story, there's a plot twist.
The initial hope, the big dream, was for that one silver bullet marker. A test that would just give a clear yes or no. But the reality is, it's just not that simple. It turns out that no single biomarker is specific or reliable enough to be a slam dunk on its own.
And the reasons for this are some really big hurdles. For one thing, these markers aren't only found in bipolar disorder. They pop up in other conditions too. On top of that, different studies sometimes get conflicting results, which makes things messy. Then you have all the confounding factors, things like medication, diet, or lifestyle that can totally change the levels of these markers. And maybe the biggest challenge of all, what we measure in the blood of your arm might not be a perfect mirror of what's actually happening deep inside the brain. But here's the thing. This complexity didn't stop the research. Not at all. It just forced everyone to get smarter, to change the entire blueprint for how they were approaching the problem. So instead of hunting for that one single clue, the whole game has shifted. The new goal is to identify a complex pattern across many markers all at once, to find a complete biological fingerprint that's truly unique to the disorder. This new approach is called omics research. And honestly, it's like going from that old-school detective with a magnifying glass to a full-on modern forensics lab. We're talking about analyzing DNA, proteins, all kinds of different molecules at the same time to build a rich, detailed biological profile. And if this works, wow, the payoff could be absolutely transformative. A successful panel could change every single stage of patient care. First, you could have early detection and identify who's at risk. Then, you get a much more accurate diagnosis and maybe even identify different subtypes of the disorder. From there, you could build truly personalized treatment plans. And finally, you could proactively monitor someone and even predict a relapse before it happens.
And look, this isn't just about cool science. The researchers behind this work put it perfectly.
Their goal is to substantially improve the efficiency and cost-effectiveness of interventions, ultimately enhancing the quality of life for patients. It's all about making healthcare better, cheaper, and more personal. So we're left with this really powerful question. We've seen the science shift from searching for a single clue to assembling a complex biological fingerprint. If this is successful, it won't just improve one diagnosis. It could represent a fundamental revolution in how we understand, diagnose, and treat mental health conditions altogether. Thank you for watching The Explainer.